What's up, everybody? Tobin here with you. Thanks for checking us on out. Much appreciated. Got a lot of stuff going on, man. It's good to be back here on a Monday, back in the building, checking things out, having some fun. Got a fun week ahead as the Dolphins. They're going to be doing some joint practices with the Eagles this week. They get back on the practice field on Tuesday, so looking forward to that as they are starting to wind down this preseason, and we can get to the real goods of it, man, which is kicking Mac Jones' ass. That's what we're all looking forward to. If you guys can, and you guys like the content here, you guys could do a real solid for me supporting what I'm doing in a new project, which is called The Porpoise Pod. New podcast I'm doing with my guy, Alex Solana. If you guys could subscribe to that, I'll put the link down here in the description. That would be much appreciated. We'll be putting some episodes up on 7-Eyed Tickets YouTube page as well. YouTube.com/TheTicketMiami, so you guys can check that out there. That's also where you can find the Tobin and Leroy Show, which is weekdays from 6 to 10 a.m. So let's check that on out, everybody. Now, as far as this week is concerned, it'll be interesting to watch on the injury front where things stand with Jaylen Waddle. He did not play in the preseason game, which was not a surprise because he was held out all of practice last week, that he was dealing with something that, he was willing to play through, and that the coaching staff decided to hold him back and didn't play in the preseason game. Not surprising there. We were a little surprised that Tyreek Hill didn't play because it seemed like it was heading towards that direction that he was going to play. But now, as you head into the last week of practice, I'm curious to see the way that they go about this, how much action everybody is going to get, because it does feel like Mike McDaniel does lean more in the direction of, I want my ponies for the regular season when it really matters, as opposed to this preseason thing. And you've had some hints of this. Like, this is a guy that has been giving veteran guys the day off. He has been pretty cautious. If anything has been bubbling up with anybody, they usually get the day off, because the whole point of him is to get this to the season. What does it matter? If you're not fighting for a roster spot, you're not out there proving something, what does it matter that you're not out there and you're not practicing a couple of days? We all know that Waddle's good. We all know that Waddle has seemed to really, really take this thing by the horns with this offense. In fact, Mike McDaniel was mentioning this when talking about his injury, that one of the reasons they were extra cautious with him is because they've been impressed with the work that he's already been doing.
With Waddle, that's just an exercise of restraint, because it would be one thing. I think I'd probably be less cautious had he not come back from, his, out of any player on the team, his jump in the scheme from OTAs to training camp was the highest. Like, he was doing well, but kind of swimming in the playbook. And I was very interested to see, a second-year guy with his first off season, how he's going to come back for training camp. And he exceeded my expectations, and you guys know I have high expectations for him. So when we noticed something that was a little tight, and just we really wanted to be preventative, we've been extra cautious with him, because just knowing where he's at in his game within the offense and how well he was doing.
So a couple of things there. One, you love to hear the fact that Jaylen Waddle has been working extremely well with knowing this offense and doing everything they can to get everything down in this offense and figured out. And two, that the coaches has been so impressed with him, in spite of the fact that they have very, very high expectations of him. Mike McDaniel saying that he has very, very high expectations of him, that they don't feel like him being out is going to hurt him at all. And one of the things that's been noticeable about Waddle is the guy's been getting a ton of reps in practice, whereas a guy like Tyreek Hill is taking limited reps and not necessarily in there the whole time. Jaylen Waddle is in there with first stringers, third stringers, second stringers. Like, he's in there with Tua, he's in there with Teddy, he's in there with Skyler, he's in there with everybody at different positions and getting reps. Almost to the version of like what a Mike Gesicki is doing in the preseason game, where they're trying to give him as many physical reps at tight end as possible. They've been doing that with Waddle all over the field because they plan to use him in a lot of different ways. And that dynamic of having all that space and all that speed, and we'll get to that in just a second because Mike McDaniel had some cool stuff to talk about with the Miami Heat coach Erik Spoelstra being at camp. We finally got his thoughts on that. Jaylen Waddle is going to be key to that. And so, yeah, you absolutely want him at his peak. This is a guy who you want to get through the season cautious with, even though McDaniel says that he is kind of getting annoyed with sitting out.
This week we plan to get him involved a little bit, but I plan to be very cautious with him as well, just knowing what he means to the team and how we don't want him to have any lingering setbacks. We want him full speed, and we rely on him for a multitude of things, and we want to make sure that he is comfortable and 100% full go. I mean, shoot, he's starting to get pretty annoyed with how cautious we're being, but I think it's to his credit, and I think it's the best thing for the Dolphins, and I think you guys would be mad at me if I wasn't.
I mean, it's hard to be mad at Mick coaching. I mean, you are totes adorbs, and I would have a hard time. I would have a hard time staying mad at Mike McDaniel, but he is right in that he is going to be vital for this team. He's going to be a huge piece of it, and I think everybody knows it. I think that the offense knows it. I think even with Tua out there, I think we know that Tua has got the Waddle Tyreek thing. I think that's set. I think that we know that the chemistry is going to be good. We know that he knows Jaylen Waddle very, very well. If anything, you're starting to see this as being a benefit for the other receivers because this has been a very hotly contested position in camp. We've had controversy of certain guys wanting more opportunities in Preston Williams and Lynn Bowden, and now you have a chance where these guys are all getting shots. Now, still, you got guys like Erik Spoelstra, Easy-E out there killing it with Skylar Thompson in the second preseason game. And, yeah, he has seemingly flashed late in these games, but, I mean, he is blowing the doors off of the competition as far as it's like putting up numbers, being a reliable go-to receiver for a guy like Skylar Thompson to trust him time and time again because they're trusting him so much. So Waddle being out and Tyreek sitting out so far has given guys the chance to kind of figure out, okay, who's playing behind them? Who are the guys that are going to be? Now, we think it's going to be Cedric Wilson. It seems like it's going to be Cedric Wilson, but is Ezukama doing enough to get himself in there? Braylon Sanders having some big catches, but also having some drops. What is going to be the battle there? Is he going to be able to make a splash? Preston Williams, Lynn Bowden, guys who have, kind of made some things known on social media that they're not the happiest, and Preston Williams vocally not the happiest. Will we find themselves in a position where they are trying to ask out? One other thing that I wanted to get to as far as we get into this week that is with the Dolphins is Erik Spoelstra. Erik Spoelstra, Miami Heat head coach, was visiting the Dolphins practice last week, and I think we had a feeling like how this conversation was going to go, where Erik Spoelstra is fascinated or would be fascinated why Mike McDaniel does the certain things that he does using space and all that type of stuff. And Mike McDaniel gave some voice to this yesterday when asked about what his visit with Erik Spoelstra was like.
It was interesting. He was pretty interested in yak, which was a cool conversation because a lot of the terms that we use for yak, I kind of use basketball terms to kind of illustrate it. So that was a cool conversation as well. But it was more like, just can we get things from each other? Very, very different sports, but very similar in that we're all dealing with a time where the athletes are as athletic and finely tuned as they've ever been in their lives. As a result, you have to train them differently. The days of Larry Zonka, Don Shula 4 days, those are things of the past. He even spoke about, things are a little bit different in how they approach things since 2010, and the physicality of practices and all those things. There's a lot of commonality, even though the sports are very different, and it was just an awesome opportunity to have him around.
I think that's really cool. That the idea that Spo also came into the game very young age, had to replace a legend in Pat Riley, and McDaniel, I don't think quite understood the situation that Spo came. Spo came in with a young superstar in Dwayne Wade, didn't necessarily have all the ponies. I think that it's arguable that if you're going to go roster for roster, I would say that Mike McDaniel has a much better roster than Spo had, even with Spo having a consensus top 5 player in the league. The rest of the roster was a little bit suspect, and they wanted to keep that flexibility, obviously, for the big boom of 2010 when they got everybody here. But while Spo had to replace a legend, Mike McDaniel is more in coming on a team that was pretty damn good. So I think he has those expectations in that regard, and that this seems like a very, very talented roster. Normally, when you're a first-year head coach, you come into a pretty awful situation, like Brian Flores did when he came around. So that's an interesting thing. And then the idea that he talked a little bit more about the idea of space, and that in football they use speed, and then in basketball that they use shooters. So I think that was a cool thing. They probably vibed on a lot. And I like that, man. I like the idea that you have the Heat head coach who's done this before with going to some with Pete Carroll and going to Atlanta, getting in there and getting a chance to speak with the young head coach of the Miami Dolphins and getting his thoughts on things. I think is a pretty awesome meeting of the minds. McCochin and Spo right there together. And as Spo would say, characters are made of a bed of roses and sunshine. Like steel is forged in fire between the hammer and the anvil. Right now, we're between the hammer and the anvil. This is, well, in this case, the NFL, but he says the NBA. So I think for Mike McDaniel, hopefully he picked Spo's brain and got all that he could from a top 15 all-time NBA head coach. And maybe he'll have some of the stuff utilized this week as they go into their practices and final game against the Eagles. We're looking forward to that.